seen things you people wouldn't believe.
Guys, this is Brian at Whisper Status 74. Welcome to the community. Welcome to the channel. If this is the first time you were seeing me, please consider liking and subscribing. We are Real Tech for Real People. Today's video will be a tech therapy video. I haven't done one of these in about 4 months. If you're new to the channel, this might be a weird video for you. It's almost like a community live stream, but you can't really interact with me. But it's where I kind of speak directly to you guys, almost in a therapeutic sort of way, talking some of you off the ledge as you're making some decisions based on certain things that I do want to cover in this video. I know things are crazy out there in this world. In February, I did a video about Wuhan, China, and possibility of new consoles and an iPhone being delayed in February. I have no idea that it was going to spread across the world and affect so many of us. People in my own community and my own life have been impacted. I hope you guys, some of you have actually been impacted yourselves. I hope everybody is doing okay and that you're safe. And many of our areas are shutting back down. I hope many of you are okay. But the reason for the tech therapy approach, which is my favorite video to do on this channel, they're probably the least watched, and that's okay. That's not why I do this, to have more views and more likes or anything like that, is to check in on the community and see how you guys are doing. Now, even with all of that happening, many of you are making purchases. Best Buy is doing well. A lot of these companies are doing fine simply because we're home and we're buying and we're making purchases. I'm in the process of upgrading my PC. You see there on the Sony 900E, I need a new motherboard. I need a new CPU. And what I was doing was going through all the videos, all the information, which CPU I want. I know I'll need a new GPU. And as I'm going through all of that footage and all of that information, and if you've ever upgraded a PC, especially a CPU and a motherboard combination, it can make you a little bit crazy. Why? Is because a lot of the CPUs and the motherboards are on promised tech. What is coming, what might be utilized, what might not be utilized. And that got me thinking about many of you guys with TVs and HDMI 2.1. FreeSync, G-Sync, FreeSync Premium, variable refresh rate. And what's interesting is hearing a lot of this in the community and hearing it on YouTube. Being a PC gamer, these are not new terms to me. They're fairly new to console gamers. They're fairly new to people that are into TVs. I remember when input lag kind of got measured in 2014, 2015. Before that, many of us just threw our displays in dynamic and rocked it, having no idea that we were at 128 milliseconds. But once we became aware of input lag, it became something that a lot of us stressed over. And that's happening now with screen tear and variable refresh rate and all of these acronyms and terms that are brought up and that many people are making way too much of. Now, we're going to be a little bit all over the place in this video. That's how these videos run. I do not edit. I do not read off a script. As you can tell, these videos are long, so please buckle up. But I am speaking directly to you if you're interested in buying a display this year. So, HDMI 2.1, we're all aware of what it is. We're all aware that something like the LG CX got absolutely annihilated for not being full bandwidth, and many people ran with that. Don't buy it, it's a piece of garbage, it's not full bandwidth, having no idea what full bandwidth actually meant or what its applications would actually be in the future. It will mean absolutely nothing for many, many years. 10-bit panel, 12-bit is not going to affect it. That's just a fact, that's not my opinion. But a lot of people aren't buying this display for that reason. You're also going to find that many of the displays that are being released this year with HDMI 2.1 won't be full bandwidth either. Or they might be like the Sony 900H or their displays that are promised to have certain functionality. But that's not really the conversation today. The conversation is the marketing behind these features that are making the TV group and the console group second guess their purchases. And many of you guys are going specs and this feature instead of picture quality and value. So let's just take an example. Let's talk about a Vizio Quantum XP series. Let's say it's at Costco. It's 75 inches. People won't even look at that display until they see the new Vizio release with HDMI 2.1. I've heard very little conversation, and this is where I'll talk about conversation in the comments. I do respond to every comment or every question as long as it's brought in a positive fashion. So this is what I hear in our community. I answer comments all day. I love doing it, but it puts me in touch with what you guys are looking for. Let's just go back to the Vizio analogy. So you guys, many of you rather purchase a 65-inch Vizio Quantum XP series with variable refresh rate or HDMI 2.1 than a 75 or even a 55. So you're making choices based on no screen tear, variable refresh rate, FreeSync Premium, G-Sync, not really realizing what that is, even though you hear all the marketing, screen tear, free, and smooth. Even with VRR, there are times where you'll still see screen tearing on the LG CX, especially in games like Modern Warfare, where they're punching above their weight. But to say that these consoles that you're all waiting for, they are going to have a built-in V-Sync. They're not going to screen tear anyway. They're also going to be 4K 60 at their best for the first couple of years. Now, you may see some Xbox X Series X games push at 4K 120. They're saying certain games are going to do that, certain racing games are going to do that. But we're going to see. They're going to be dictated a lot by the developer. You're seeing PlayStation 5 games be 4K 30. So if you're going to see screen tearing, you're going to see it the other way, where it's not going to match 4K 60. There will be V-Sync enabled. You will not see screen tearing. Now, stutter-free gaming, super smooth. Well, somebody who has a PC, which I have, I've been enjoying 4K 60 for a few years. On a Sony 900E at 75 inches, I don't have screen tearing. I can play 4K 60. If I need V-Sync, whether it's variable or partial or fast, you can find all kinds of features to keep it screen tear free. But I've been enjoying that smooth experience for a few years now. But you guys are basing your television purchases on the promise of lightning quick and marketing that is making some of you make bad choices. Now, what I mean by that, I'm not saying any of the displays that you're talking about are bad choices, but there are plenty of great displays last year that you're not even looking at that are going to be way down in price. You'll be able to get a larger size, but without HDMI 2.1. Now, that can be completely fine if these displays from last year were 4K 30, but they are 120 hertz panels. They do max at 4K 60 hertz or 60 FPS when you're playing games. They'll be fine. Now, I have an LG CX in the room, HDMI 2.1. I have a Sony X950H in the room, no HDMI 2.1. I have the Sony 900E. Now, I play games on all three. What is jarring, most jarring, is the size difference of the 900E. How happy I am to go back to that immersion. And while the pixel density on the 49-inch is slightly cleaner than the 55-inch, much cleaner than the 75-inch, the immersion of the 75-inch is amazing. It's still 4K. I can sit 4 or 5 feet from it. I get this immersive, beautiful experience. I would be very upset had I bought a 55-inch CX instead of a 75-inch 900E. Now, where would that make sense now? Oh, my camera is going crazy. Right now, if you're looking at, say, a Sony 900F from a few years ago, they're still available at 75 inches and 85 inches. Many of you are going to make this choice of the CX, not because it's an OLED, not because of OLED blacks, but because of variable refresh rate, FreeSync, and G-Sync. Many of you don't realize that even though I have a GTX 1080 Ti, I can't use G-Sync yet. So I've had an HDMI 2.1 TV sitting here for almost 3 months, and I barely use that feature. I use variable refresh rate on some of my single-player games. It's a nice, smooth experience. But when I go back to the X950H, it isn't jarring. I don't say to myself, oh my God, look at all the screen tear. Oh my God, I can't play this. I haven't had a single moment of that going back and forth between the two. I haven't. What's most important, or should be most important to you guys, is picture quality. Now, if performance is most important to you, TVs shouldn't even be in the conversation. If you want true performance, if you want to be the big boys of PC, TVs are a joke. Even though the CX is probably the most fully spec'd display for gaming that we've ever seen, especially being future-proof with NVIDIA G-Sync, Now FreeSync, for those of you that said that it would never ever come, it's here, as well as variable refresh rate. The C9, or actually, the C9 hasn't been updated yet, which is an absolute nightmare. But the CX is. However, you'd be much better off with a monitor with like no response time, DisplayPort. With DisplayPort, if you had a monitor and you had a GTX card, you can enjoy 4K 120 right now. The point is, HDMI 2.1 has been sitting behind me for months and it's meant nothing. And if you're buying these TVs based on consoles that'll be out during the holidays, that will not reach their potential between 2 and 3 years, that means you're spending money on a smaller display, waiting for that functionality, when you have a 4K 60 baseline that'll be screen tear free from day one. So, why do I bring this up? Why do I care? Well, my purpose behind this channel is not to sell you products or sell you TVs. A lot of times, at least 50% of the time, is to get you to keep what you have. Your state of mind is more important to me than what you buy. So, for me, if I didn't have a channel, if I wasn't doing this community, this TV right here at 75 inches would be more than fine. Why would it be more than fine? Because it does 4K 60. Now, when I first got my GTX 1080 Ti, I had screen tearing because the GPU was too fast. So I had to go into VSync. Now, VSync for the real PC hardcore community is blasphemy because it does affect performance. The console group has no idea what that is. The console group's been playing 4K 30, not even 4K 30, for the last few years. Those of you that purchased a PS4 Pro haven't really even had 4K at all. There's been a lot of, dynamic resolution, even on the Xbox One X. So for many of you, you're looking at 4K 120, and you've never even experienced 4K 60. But you're already looking at 120, screen tear free, free sync, all these different things. But the most important thing in the world is picture quality, right? So going back to what we said about the monitors. Monitors are smaller. Typically they're IPS, they're super clean. If you don't believe me, swing by an Apple store or even a Microsoft store if they're in your area. Sit down and watch, as I did in one of the videos on the channel, watch some kid play Fortnite in 1080p on an IPS monitor that was only 60 hertz. And it was so clean, it blew away anything in this room as far as clarity. Now, the blacks weren't there, the picture quality wasn't there, but it was so clean it almost didn't matter. Now, if you put that on a large screen, you might have an issue. You might notice the lack of blacks. The point is the response time was lightning fast. No blur, no problems, it was seamless. But if that's what you really want, then go buy a monitor. I would say buy a monitor. Spend $400 on a monitor, sit close to it, call it a day. And you'll save yourself a fortune. But some of you guys are spending thousands, and picture quality ends up being last on the list. These comparisons you see me do are picture quality comparisons. It's more about which one looks better. Does the CX perform better? Yeah, it does. It's an OLED. Its pixel response is instantaneous. But do I feel like I'm losing out when I switch this one off and go back to the Sony? I don't. Not going back to an older Sony. That picture is gorgeous. And it's immersive. Some of you guys are buying displays. Now, we're going to talk about the 900H for a second. Now, I have nothing against the 900H. I did a video on it, my last video. There's two people in the community, Lee Darley and Lisa, who both have it. They absolutely love their displays. Lee had a 900E, which just died. Rest in peace, 900E. And if you listen to him or see him in the comments, you'll see where he talks about the picture quality. There's nothing wrong with the 900H at all. What bothers me about the 900H and Sony in general is the promise of HDMI 2.1 implementation. Now, there's been tons of hate against the CX for not being full bandwidth, but Sony, there's not a peep for the fact that they haven't included it on the flagship 4K display. It's only available on their 8K lineup, again, to be updated. The Z9G from last year, which is also HDMI 2.1, I haven't seen variable refresh rate on that display yet. So it's a promise. I remember the promise of Dolby Vision updates, which it finally got, the other displays other than a 900E, and its implementation wasn't very good. So my point is, to all this, there are superior displays from last year. We're going to go down the list even from Sony. Sony A9G. People are all over that display a couple of years ago. The display is absolutely gorgeous. It is now becoming a little bit more affordable. People aren't even looking at that anymore. They're going right to an LG because of HDMI 2.1. But you might not like the picture quality of the LG versus the Sony. If you're a Sony fan, you love Sony, go for the picture quality of those displays. Some of you are buying 900Hs, which is a mid-tier display. I'm sure it looks very nice. I haven't had a chance to spend a lot of time with it. But you're going there for the promise of a technology that many of you don't quite understand or think it's going to change anything. Yes, you might have some screen tear free, but what does it matter if the picture quality is not there? I admittedly am not a huge fan of the LG Nano Cell. The last couple of years that had those, other than the 9000 series, there was a lot of blooming on them. Many of you are buying those sight unseen because of HDMI 2.1. Now, other than playing Modern Warfare or Counter-Strike or any of these multiplayer games where you're flying around the screen, picture quality is going to be very important. I did a comparison today of Resident Evil 7 on PC using the Sony 950H and the LG CX. Now that game is very hard it's on PC, so it looks as good as it can look. That game is extremely hard to run on TVs. It's very washed out. The black level can crush on the CX, but more importantly, when I played it on my KS9000, my 9800, and all my other 940E, the LEDs really struggled. If you don't have a good black level in that game, you will see all kinds of clouding in the corners, and it'll pull you right out of it. So those of you who are looking forward to Ghost of Tsushima and Last of Us and these campaigns, Horizon Zero Dawn, those are cinematic experiences. They're slow. Picture quality is going to be important. The performance of HDMI 2.1, here's the thing. By the time that really gets fleshed out, by the time they update these and you'll need them with 4K 120 with ray tracing, you'll be looking at a new display. So for me, having the CX, buying this one, I promised I'd get it for the channel. I am looking at a 77-inch CX. I will use that fully. I will have an RTX card in here in about 6 months when they launch. I will be using G-Sync. I will appreciate G-Sync, but I'm very specific with that. I am a PC gamer. It is something that I will use immediately when I buy a new card. But if the CX didn't look good, I wouldn't even consider purchasing it. Picture quality will be first. If I had to choose between the 950H and the 900H, I'm going for the 950H based on picture quality. Now, 900H is, again, it's fine. It's a good display. I'm not taking anything away from it. I don't know enough about it. But I'll tell you that the flagship 950H, the 950G from last year, the Z9F, which is still out there, is still something you guys can look at, as well as last year's Samsung models, which had variable refresh rate. But no one's looking at the Q90 now, or the Q80. Every year where new displays come out, this year is definitely weird anyway, because we can't really be in the store, but most of the time I'm recommending last year's displays. This year that's not happening because HDMI 2.1 has become this magic bullet that everybody thinks is going to change your experience. Again, I'm enjoying it now. Do I like variable refresh rate? Absolutely. Could I live without it? Absolutely. If I bought this display for that reason, I'd be very disappointed. I have a Belkin HDMI 2.1 cable sitting around here. It's not doing anything. Now, I didn't think it was going to do anything, but the fact of the matter is, I'll have this TV for another, August? No, it's July. I'll have this display until the holidays. My display will be almost like a year old, and I've never used HDMI 2.1 fully. What happens when these new consoles come out at 4K 30 with ray tracing? Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with ray tracing, that's been out on PC, which all of a sudden we all wanted 4K 60. Ray tracing was enabled. Now people are running 1080p 60 with ray tracing. Just to give you an idea of how expensive that is to performance. The GTX or RTX 2080 Ti is an absolute monster. Ray tracing brought it below 60 FPS. Which is why I didn't chase it. I didn't buy the 2080 Ti because the 1080 Ti was more than enough. But had I bought it and chased ray tracing, I would not have been able to really enjoy it. I would have gotten rid of a perfectly good card. Think about Dolby Atmos. Getting rid of your existing system to throw some speakers in the ceiling makes sense now. Most movies do take advantage of it, but initially very few did. HGIG on the CX. Some of you guys are getting rid of your older C8 or over OLEDs because they don't have HGIG, which is only supported by a few games. What happens when you turn it on? In some games it looks great, in other games it doesn't do anything. So am I saying to wait and let things mature? I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is either keep what you have if you really enjoy it, but your next choice should be based on picture quality, size, and value way before HDMI 2.1. That is just how I feel. Watching you guys really struggle in the comments, making purchases on displays that are below what you want, and I hear the comments and I watch it and I watch other people fight those people and talk about all the different V-Syncs and FreeSyncs. I always wonder if you've ever even seen FreeSync or G-Sync on a monitor, on NVIDIA or AMD. All of a sudden it's become, just like every year, Dolby Vision. You know, that was, everybody had to have Dolby Vision. And Dolby Vision's a little bit different though. But my point is, a lot of people bought displays based on that. You know, based on that promise. If the implementation of Dolby Vision isn't very good, it hurts you instead of helps you. So buying a TV based on HDMI 2.1 alone is foolish, in my opinion. Now, if you buy it with picture quality, like something like the CX, you know it's got the same picture quality as the C9, but it has HDMI 2.1 functionality, or I should say the C8. But if you have a C8, enjoy a C8. The C8 looks as good as this one or the C9. I don't think OLEDs change all that much. But many of you guys didn't buy the A8H, even though it improves upon the A9G. Didn't even look at it. And I can actually tell you, I was in Value Electronics the day that the A8H came in. So Shane from Spirit Change, if you guys watch him, we were sitting at Value Electronics picking up some equipment, and I was buying the CX. And right next to it was the very first A8H. Wasn't even out in stores yet. They had it there, and I remember looking down at it and saying, I should grab that. I should get that instead of the CX. A lot of people are going to have the CX. I'll be one of the first people to have the A8H. So while him and I are looking up the specs, the very first thing that pops up on his phone is no HDMI 2.1. I didn't buy it, but I'll fully utilize it. Do you know what I'm saying? So many of you guys are not looking at the A8H, even though it's an amazing OLED. Even though in that mini shootout at Value Electronics that we did, it did edge out the CX. So you're going to choose functionality over picture quality. And I think that's a mistake. Especially when you think about gaming is only a part of it. If you have blooming, or the image is washed out, or doesn't look great, what are you going to do when you're watching Netflix? Or you're watching a 4K Blu-ray? What are you going to do when you look at that image and say to yourself, oh, Jesus, hey, I have HDMI 2.1. These displays, all of them in this room, are going to do 4K 60. That is where they would be their most comfortable. The 900E going from this display from 2017 to this one, which is state-of-the-art, it isn't jarring. I don't go, oh my God, it's so sluggish, I can't play this. This one's quicker, better input lag, better response time, across the board, variable refresh rate. Then I compare these two. This one doesn't make me say, oh my God, I can't play this. So I am just proving to you that I barely use it. And if I made that purchase based on that alone, I'd struggle. I want a larger CX because of how good the picture quality is. And I think that as good as this looks at 77 inches, the immersion is going to pull me in. But for HDMI 2.1, that's not enough. And I want you guys to hear me on that. I want you guys to trust me, I've made that mistake. I've made that mistake of chasing the technology. I've made that mistake of the promise of this happening. Wait till this, and checking out those motherboards, all the promises of these added features that won't help me. I'm going to double pay for a motherboard that's $300 or $400 just to cover myself because they have me spinning. But it's much more complicated on the PC side. We only have a little taste of that on the console side, and you guys are losing your minds. You're looking at displays, like I said, instead of buying a larger display that you really, really want, you're going to buy a smaller cousin of it because it's going to have HDMI 2.1. I think that's a mistake. I think when the new Vizios come out, look at last year's. If you can buy a 75-inch display and have that immersion and have that home theater feel, I would go with that. Don't get caught up in the marketing. That's what marketing is all about. Make you buy. What's going to be next? 12-bit. Why are we seeing 8K? 8K is just something, it's an easier number for the consumer to say, oh, I got to have that. Got to have 8K. Got to have dynamic tone mapping. I got to have, okay. But what's its real application? Console launches are always rocky. Everyone in history has struggled. They've never reached their full potential. It takes years for developers to figure out how to use them. The PS5 is going to be amazing. I absolutely cannot wait for that console. A lot of the games are going to be 30 FPS. If you compromise on picture quality and buy a lesser display, right? And the first year of games are 4K 30, which the PS4 Pro can do, by the way. How upset are you going to be that by the time that display hits it, by the time that console hits its stride in 2 years, you'll be ready to buy a new display? Or the display that you currently already have would be just fine. It would have been fine. Also, we can argue that things like Samsung, some of their displays may have taken a step back. And I don't like what's happening with manufacturers. I don't like that the CX was updated to a FreeSync Premium. But at the time of this video, the C9 wasn't. I don't love that they solved the local dimming issue in gaming with the Q90T, but didn't do it on the Q90R. So there is marketing. There's a lot at play. But my point is, these consoles are going to be very slow out the gate. They're not going to deliver what you think they're going to deliver. They'll bring you beautiful visuals. It's not going to be 4K 120. And since ray tracing is such an expensive performance, it's a beautiful, beautiful feature. You guys are going to love it. But there's no way you're going to see 4K 120 with ray tracing. You're not going to see 4K 60 with ray tracing. These consoles are powerful. But they're as powerful as what PC gamers are already enjoying. That's always been the way. But you don't need a new TV to enjoy them. If your TV is 4K 60, even if you have a TCL that has a 60 hertz refresh rate, keep it. It'll be fine. Most importantly, does it do HDR? Now, if you're somebody that has an older display that doesn't do HDR, I completely understand you want to upgrade. But if you have 4K, you have good picture quality, you have HDR, you have Dolby Vision, you have all of these features already, I would purchase. If you're not purchasing, hold on to what you have. Enjoy these consoles for the first year or two, and then buy because you're ready to upgrade. By that point, G-Sync, FreeSync Premium, all that stuff will be on all these displays. I think Sony not having them is a disgrace. I honestly do. I love Sony, but I think it's a disgrace. Not because it's necessary, but because the others have it. Now, hear what I'm saying. If we're sitting there with those engineers, I promise you they're thinking the same way that I am. I promise you they're like, what for? Why? Why would we want to put HDMI 2? We don't need it. I believe HDMI 2.1, the actual ports are expensive. I do believe that because Denon's new receivers have one port. Samsung TVs, one port. LG, 4 ports. Not full bandwidth. There has to be an inherent cost to those. There has to be. But to not have it here is not because it's needed. It's because the competition has it. And you guys are feeling foolish for buying something that doesn't have it. I see it in the comments. Hey, I purchased this. Somebody comes right over the top with a dunk saying, whoa, it doesn't have HDMI 2.1. Who cares? It's an A9G. It's a Master Series. It's a Z9F. It's a Master Series. Who cares if it has HDMI 2.1? They're gorgeous. Who cares if it's a Q9FN, a Q8FN, or a Vizio from last year? Upgrade because you need to. You want to go up in size, upgrade. But please make picture quality your priority. If you want performance, the best possible performance for gaming, for PC, buy a monitor. Save your money and buy a ultra wide, fast as hell monitor. That's going to be so clean, but it's going to be $400, $300. But when it comes to TVs, remember, we're watching movies on them. We're watching sports on them. HDMI 2.1 has nothing to do with those applications. I am a huge gamer. I spend 80% of my time down here gaming. It does matter to me. But if I didn't have the knowledge of why and why I want it, I would not buy a 77-inch CX to game only. I'd rather buy a 77-inch C8. And that's where I'm going to leave this tech therapy video, is don't get caught up in the marketing. Don't get confused. Don't get to where you feel like you have to have that. Gotta have that. I have it. I enjoy it. Would it make me choose between these two alone? Absolutely not. It's a cool feature. Sometimes I have it off and don't even realize it. So it's a long video, 31 minutes in. Love the one you're with. Keep the display you have. If you're gonna upgrade, picture quality, value, functionality, then get into the things that you think might show up in the consoles. If you're somebody who's a PC gamer like me and a console gamer, and you think G-Sync is something you're going to buy on your new cards, go picture quality first again, then go functionality. Don't buy a nano cell instead of this other one because it's got HDMI 2.1. The picture quality, nothing against the nano cell, but the picture quality is going to disappoint you. But you'll be happy of HDMI 2.1. So, long video. I'm sorry, it's not really a rant video, but I'm just really knowing you guys are struggling in those comments and you're making bad decisions that I know you're not going to be happy with. I know you're not going to be happy with that picture quality. You're going to struggle and you're going to say, God, HDMI 2.1 is not even being used. Let's just say worst case scenario or best. Then I'll let you guys go. HDMI 2.1 shows up day one. 4K, 120, ray tracing, ready to rock. You're still fine at 4K 60, which is unbelievable, which many of you have never experienced. Ray tracing, you'll see. HDMI 2.1 is not a visual thing. It's a feel. It'll be smoother. It'll move smoother, don't get me wrong. But the picture quality will be the same. You're not going to see more options in your menu in terms of visuals. At 4K 60, you'll be able to enjoy that. If you have an A9G, enjoy it. You have displays from a couple of years ago. But if you see those displays drop, buy them. Buy them. They're absolutely gorgeous. Some of their picture quality is nearly flawless. You'll have 4K 60. You'll see the same thing the rest of us are saying. But when you go into a cinematic game that's beautiful with HDR, you'll be enjoying that at 4K 60. It'll be smooth. It'll be screen tear free. You'll love it. But you'll thank me for it. Picture quality number one. Value, size. But HDMI 2.1, as much as it's going to be fun and great to use, the consoles aren't going to fully be utilizing that for quite some time. Let them grow. Let them mature. But don't torture yourself. Love the one you're with. Keep the one you have. If you're going to upgrade, upgrade that way. Or grab a monitor. That's just my thoughts, just my opinion. Speaking to you guys directly, 35 minutes in. I'm so sorry how long the video is. Tech therapy videos are always this long. Love you guys. I will see you in the comment. Let me know what you think. Again, consider liking and subscribing. I will talk to you guys soon. Take care.